He's going to talk about the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and then we're going to get into it. Clip number 4.
You took some heat on Capitol Hill recently. An Ohio Democratic representative looked at you and said, I don't think you're talking enough about jobs, and that's what my people, my constituents want in my community. When you say that the economy is going to start to create jobs, why hasn't it created jobs to this point?
Just because this was the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Huge amount of damage done to businesses, families across the country, and we're going to be living with that damage for some time. It's just going to take us a while to heal that damage. But look at what the president did. He came in and did the largest, most forceful package of support for the economy we had considered doing in 50 years. And he moved very aggressively to fix what was broken.
All right, untrue. Now, a couple of things here. Number one, he says it as if it was inevitable. Well, we had this terrible economic recession, and so we had to react to it. But what he leaves out, and what I'm more angry at Matt Lauer for, because he lets him leave it out, is that he helped to cause it, right? So why didn't Matt Lauer ask him, hey, you know what? Weren't you partly responsible? You were one of the top regulators in the country at the New York Fed, and it was your job to make sure that these financial companies did not collapse, and you let them collapse. I mean, you say it as if you're an innocent bystander. And Lauer never asked that question in the interview and drove me crazy about it. And so he lets Geithner get away with, like, oh, shucks, we were helpless, dealt this hand, what could we do?
I don't disagree with Geithner's hand in this, but he's being asked about the recession. He inherited whomever he inherited it from. He inherited a recession, and he did have a president behaving, aggressively from the outset in response.
And that's what I disagree with.
Recession.
Okay, so let's start with the disagreement. First of all, what would have been aggressive is, hey, banks, now you're all bankrupt. You're at my mercy. Okay, if you'd like me to bail you out, here are your new rules. Okay, here are the new regulations. I'm not going to let you do a highly leveraged, highly risky, highly secret credit default swaps that endangers the health of our economy. If you want the money and you want to survive, you're going to play by these new rules so you don't screw up again. That would have been fairly aggressive. Instead, we're a year and a half later, almost 2 years later now, and we still don't have any reform. That is not aggressive. That's pathetic.
Okay, that is true, but in light of the timing and context of when he was forced to address this, when his administration was forced to address this, it's a trauma victim in a car accident who lives, his leg works, but he's got a little bit of a limp. I mean, yes, they didn't fix it exactly right. They didn't do all the things that were required, and they still haven't. But the point is, they responded to a recession in an emergent way, and they did some imperfect things, but they also stemmed the tide of recession. And they did it in a willy-nilly way in places, and there are flaws in almost every single part of the way they addressed it. However, they did address it, and they did stop the bleeding, as it were, just to keep pushing that. But I disagree that expecting perfection out of this is completely different than saying, okay, we turned the tide, but we have to make some wholesale changes that we have not yet made. We have to change the rules of the game.
I'm going to expand upon your analogy. It's like they stitched up the patient, and so they stopped the external bleeding, and then you look at it, and I criticize them, and people say, well, oh, you're worried about how they did the stitches, but they stopped the bleeding. No, I'm not criticizing them for the stitches. I'm criticizing them because they didn't check for internal bleeding, and the patient definitely has internal bleeding and will die soon. Okay, I'm apocalyptic about this. I believe that since there has been, if you will, since there has been no real reform, it is a near guarantee that we will have a gigantic financial collapse. I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm not even saying a year from now. If you force me to give you a time frame, of course I don't really know, but I would guess about a year and a half to 3 years. This thing is going to crater in on itself. And look, the part they were aggressive about, I don't want, again, it's not black and white, is that they were aggressive about the stimulus spending. That was good. That was generally right. And the auto companies, et cetera. I mean, they tried on the things that did not involve actually taking on the bankers. when it came to spending money, which no one objects to in the real world, okay, the Republicans pretend to object to it, et cetera, which is easy. It's always easier to spend money. They did a pretty good job, right? And some people will say, no, that stimulus spending was not enough. I'm not in that camp. He did the best he could on that, okay? The real problem is, of course, in reform. Now, so that we're going to get to the heart of that issue in the next clip.
And my feeling about that, just because you were able to say it, is that, and I am a layperson on economic issues, but I listen to and I read quite a bit about them and read the broad spectrum. My feeling is that you might be right, but I feel like reform is more imminent than is collapse, and I feel from what I have read and what I've been able to glean from the dialogue, that's what it feels like to me.
Right. The current reform is pathetic, and even the strongest version of the current reform will not do the job. So there would have to be a second round of reform, and there's no way they're going to have a second round of reform before the collapse. Not no way. That's way too strong. Yeah. But I'd be really surprised. So now let's go to the heart of the matter, clip number 5 here, where Geithner is going to tell us this is all deeply unfair and drive me crazy.
Here's what you said to the New Yorker magazine. You said, quote, "My basic view is that we did a pretty successful job of putting out a severe financial crisis and avoiding a Great Depression. We saved the economy, but we kind of lost the public doing it." What do you mean you lost the public?
Because as the president said, and he said this many times, we had to do some very unpopular things. People looked at what had happened. They saw people in the financial community having made terrible mistakes that caused millions of lost jobs, millions of lost homes. But to help them, to protect them from the damage, we had to come in and do things that were going to help those banks, help those companies. But if we hadn't done that, Matt, if we hadn't done it, you would have seen millions more jobs lost and hundreds of thousands of more companies having to shut their doors. And that is the basic sense of unfairness which is driving so much anger and frustration across the country.
Yeah.
But again,
and you understand that anger and frustration.
Absolutely.
When someone's out there and they haven't gotten a job that they lost 2 years ago, and they get the feeling that business on Wall Street has returned to normal, and the executives are getting big bonuses again, and they still can't pay for their mortgage or they're underwater, they say, where's the fairness in this?
Exactly, and it's not fair. It's deeply unfair, and they should be angry about it. But again, what was the choice the president had to make? He had to decide whether he was going to act to fix it or stand back because it might be more popular not to have to do that kind of stuff, and that would have been calamitous for the American economy. Much, much worse than what we went through already.
This is part and parcel of why I can't stand Tim Geithner and why I can't stand the media, okay? Look, he keeps talking about how it's deeply unfair, as if he had nothing to do with it. He was as critical a player in the Bush administration and the Obama administration in making those decisions as you could have. I mean, Hank Paulson, Ben Bernanke, Tim Geithner. I mean, he was part and parcel of making those deeply unfair decisions. Now, he says it as if he had nothing to do with it, and Lauer lets him get away with it.
I disagree with you. I think he's acknowledging that it was unfair. I think he's saying that we did it knowing that it was going to be perceived as unfair, but it was the only place we had to go, and it's hard to sell.
That gets to point number 2, which is the constant straw man that he sets up and that the press lets them get away with. We only had 2 choices, which is a colossal depression, or we give all the money to the bankers. Well, look, that's a straw man. Those weren't your only 2 choices. How about the choice of, hey, you know what, we got to rescue the financial industry, and maybe we even have to rescue these banks. But Simon Johnson, former chief economist of the IMF, says, look, there were 13 bankers that came in the room. You should have fired at least 12 of those guys. Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan might be an exception, okay, because they didn't deal in the credit default swaps as much, et cetera. And you're not blindly firing people. You're firing people because they screwed up the global economy and they're doing a bad job, and you need to find somebody new. Or, for example, AIG. You didn't need to do backdoor bailouts of Goldman Sachs, paying off 100% on a ridiculous bet against AIG. You didn't have to do all of that, but Tim Geithner made those decisions, pushed for those decisions, and those were the ones that wound up being deeply unfair and deeply unnecessary. And that's what he doesn't get challenged on, and that's what he's definitely wrong about.